So today's focus is going to be on extinctions and variation in the population and kind of how that can be impacted by the extinction, as well as how it can impact the ecosystem after the extinction has occurred. So there have been 5 major extinctions that have happened throughout Earth's history. You don't need to memorize these. Okay? We're just kind of giving you some examples here. Okay? We are currently going through a 6th major extinction now. Okay? But you can see there were extinctions 439 million years ago, okay? Ranging all the way up through the present. Again, you do not need to memorize all of these different time periods. You don't need to remember Permian and Triassic and Cretaceous. Okay? What we need to realize is that extinctions are rapid during, basically I've got a rapid loss during times of ecological stress. Okay? That can be due to global warming or cooling. That can be a man-made situation like we're experiencing now. Okay? That could be due to a loss or a gain of usable oxygen, kind of again due to the atmosphere. For instance, if a large volcano erupts, that spews enough ash into the atmosphere that it can decrease the amount of usable oxygen. Okay? And asteroid collisions are another thing that can cause severe enough ecological stress that then can result in major extinction. Human activity can also affect or drive extinctions. Again, if you think about it, our impact on the environment can cause global warming, right? We can affect the atmospheric oxygen. So especially as our population continues to grow and grow and grow, that is currently driving our present extinction that we are in. For example, loss of habitat. You can see this happening here where they're clearing the forest there. Those organisms are losing their habitat. And they cannot if they cannot migrate somewhere else, then they could potentially be wiped out. As well as an introduction of exotic species. Introduction of exotic species is basically an invasive species situation. I know we haven't done ecology yet, but hopefully you are familiar with this. This is a species that doesn't belong, like the Burmese pythons that are in Florida, right? They have no natural predators, so they outcompete everyone else, and so they start to take over the ecosystem. So those can cause extinction of another organism. Back to that example with the Burmese python in Florida, they are actually putting the Florida panther in jeopardy of extinction because they are winning the competition with them. Our contributions to global warming can have an impact on extinctions, as well as poaching. Poaching is our illegal hunting of organisms. That had an impact on rhinoceros, and it's having an impact on elephants. So when it comes to extinction rates and what's occurring in the ecosystem, diversity is an important part of that. And so the amount of diversity in the ecosystem can be determined by both the speciation rate and the extinction rate, kind of taking those two pieces of information together. So when the speciation rate is high, meaning we're forming lots of new species, then we usually have large genetic variety happening there. And when I have lots of genetic variety, then I have lots of opportunity for natural selection to occur. Right? A lot of variety, that means I can really be picky about who is the best suited for the environment for reproduction purposes. With a high extinction rate, I have very few individual adaptation opportunities. My genetic variety is lower because the organisms are dying. And so since the organisms are dying, I'm taking alleles potentially completely out of that gene pool. So a high speciation rate is going to have a high genetic variety, and a high extinction rate will then decrease my genetic variety. And so if my extinction rate is high, for example, in this picture here, you can see like wolves and cheetahs, their extinction rate is high. There are large amounts of them that are being lost every single year. Cheetah is a big one. The fact that the genetic variety within that population is so low now, that they have a lot of problems because there's not enough variety within the population because they are so low. Their extinction rate is so high. So that high extinction rate decreases our genetic variety, which can cause further problems. For instance, disease could come through and wipe them all out because there's not any variety there, where some of them are potentially naturally resistant. So if we have a high extinction rate happening, organisms that are surviving the extinction may no longer be able to occupy their original niche. Again, I know we haven't done ecology, but if you remember our niche, that is our basically where we fit into the ecosystem. It's the role in the ecosystem. So maybe your role is a little tiny lizard that, eats bugs off of a particular plant so you can keep that plant from getting, destroyed. So the organisms that survive may no longer be able to occupy their original niche for whatever reason that is. Maybe the organisms that they needed to form that niche don't exist anymore. Okay? So they're going to either have to be able to adapt to their new environment and potentially a whole new role in the ecosystem. And then if they cannot do that, then they run the risk of becoming extinct themselves. Okay? The organisms that don't survive, they're leaving an available niche. So maybe that opens up more opportunity for the organisms that did survive. So the ecosystem is going to see some changes and shifts based on which organisms survived and which ones did not. So the more variety that there is within that population, they're going to be able to respond to changes in the environment better, right? The more variety I have, the more I can respond to those changes because I have a lot of different organisms there. And I'm hopefully going to have some that are better suited than others. Okay? Less genetic variation, I've got an increased risk then of my population going down or potentially becoming extinct. So those diverse populations are more resilient, okay? And they're stronger against any form of change that's coming into the ecosystem. And so alleles that are potentially advantageous in one environment could be harmful in another. And so that's why we like to keep the variety. Like, for instance, let's think about sickle cell, right? Sickle cell in the middle of Dallas, Texas is not advantageous. Okay? However, if I'm on the coast of Africa with a high malaria rate, sickle cell could be advantageous. So it's important that we keep the allele around because sometimes it is useful, okay? But it is, it's a fine line between it being useful and it being harmful. So again, we'll be looking at some more data to look at this, to write about, to analyze, but to kind of pick this material apart a little bit more in class.